Hello and good morning, everyone. I'm Ying from SG Tech. Welcome to our Go Global webinar series covering ASEAN on tech opportunities in Thailand. So this session is our three-part series covering 3 different countries. We have done Indonesia and Vietnam previously, and today is our first session for Thailand. So this webinar is organized by SG Tech in partnership with Orisa International and also supported by our payment solution partner, Western Union Business Solutions. So Thailand is the second largest economy in Southeast Asia, very resilient with strong growth fundamentals. The Thai economy has reported inflation rates of under 5% for most of the last decade. Its well-developed transportation system, infrastructure, and also communications network support many growth sectors such as tourism, food manufacturing, and the automotive industry. So before we begin, just like to highlight some house rules. Firstly, this webinar will be recorded for archival and marketing purposes. The recording will be uploaded onto SG Tech's website. Next, you can also type your questions in the Zoom Q&A box throughout the entire session. We will answer selected questions at the end of the session, where after the second speaker has finished his presentation. So today we are very happy to have 2 very nice speakers to share with us on the economic overview of Thailand and also the ICT and digital landscape in Thailand. So Mr. Steven, he's a currency specialist at Western Union Business Solutions covering APAC. So Mr. Steven has worked in financial services for more than 15 years, originally covering markets as a journalist. Steven later worked for a global institutional investment firm and made the shift into financial analysis. His current role at Western Union Business Solutions is helping companies understand what's driving the different financial markets and how it might impact Australian businesses. He's also very frequently interviewed for his views on TV stations as well as news publications. Steven has a Bachelor of Arts, graduate diploma in Applied Finance, and is also an accredited member of the Australian Financial Markets Association. So let us welcome Steven, please.
Thanks, Ying, very much for the introduction, and thanks everyone for having me today. Really excited to be able to talk about the shifting economic picture in Thailand and also what Western Union Business Solutions can do for technology firms that are operating both in Thailand and right throughout the region. As you saw in the video before, Western Union as a whole has been in existence for 170 years. And originally we started off putting telegraph lines through the Wild West in America. And back then, that was one of the most advanced technologies available, and we've continued to lead technology over the last 170 years, moving into money transfers in 1871 and moving into launching America's first satellite in the early 1970s, the first commercial satellite. So we've always been a technology firm. So I'm excited that we can work today with SG Tech. Now, let me share my screen and I'll let you know what we're planning to cover today. Really, we're looking at the more broad economic overview of Thailand, and then Kun will look more closely at some of the ICT opportunities in Thailand. But at Western Union, my role is the currency strategist to look after the APAC region, so from New Zealand to Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the emerging economies. And certainly, as we'll outline, there's been a real disparity in performances and a real disparity in recoveries globally. And that's really going to paint the picture, I think, globally and in Thailand over the next 12 months. But we've recently launched our Are You Ready for 2022 guide that looks at some of the key themes in financial markets and some of our currency forecasts for a wide range of FX markets. So I might touch on, first of all, some of the big key global themes that we're seeing as we enter into 2022. and then I will move on to a more specific focus on Thailand. But as Ying said, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be happy to address those questions at the end of the session. So, as I said, I wanted to start off by looking at what are the big themes in financial markets in 2022. And of course, there's no bigger theme than the way that the economy will rebound from the global COVID crisis. Now, we've already seen some parts of the world rebound strongly, and of course, those more advanced, rich economies, particularly the UK, Europe, and the US, were able to roll out vaccines quicker. And as a result, they've moved back to a new state of not normality, but what some experts are calling COVID normal. That's a big explosion in growth. And in fact, real tension in supply chains as those supply chains try to cope with that growth. So we're already seeing a real rebound. As I said, it's not going to be uniform. It's going to be in different paces around the world. So what are some of the key opportunities in 2022, and what are some of the key risks that we've identified? Well, first of all, we've already seen this, particularly in the developed economy. The grey line here is the response in the second quarter of this year, and the yellow line is the response in the third quarter of this year. And the top opportunity is a spending boom as consumers unleash their accumulated savings. And during lockdowns, consumers, particularly that have been able to rely on jobs or rely on income support, have been saving. And that's part of the reason we've seen such a huge demand shock in the economy. It's driving, as we mentioned, tensions in supply chains, and it's driving those price pressures in inflation as well. So that's obviously having some negative ramifications, but it's a major opportunity and continues to be the major opportunity as we go into 2022. That spending booms thanks to those accumulated savings. This has become less pronounced in the third quarter, but max vaccination rollout means an early return to normal. As we mentioned, the US, UK, and in Europe have already gone through this phase, but most of the other parts of the world are still playing catch up. Certainly, right throughout Asia, from Australia, that's just emerging out of lockdown, from New Zealand, which is still in lockdown, to right throughout Asia, which has seen some countries more ahead than others. That's going to be key, and particularly looking at Thailand, the return to normal is going to be critical, particularly in travel and tourism. And then finally, the other big opportunity, global policy loosening triggers robust recovery. We've already seen that, and that continues to be a key driver. Interest rates around the world remain at very low historical levels, and that provides a real boost to consumer spending and certainly a big rise in asset prices as well. So those are the key opportunities globally over the next 12 months: the spending boom, max vaccinations, and loose policy. On the flip side, what are some of the risks? Well, you can see this wasn't a risk in Q2. It was not applicable here. But in Q3, the impact of the Delta strain remains the biggest risk. And certainly we've seen that even in those economies such as Europe that have rapidly rolled out the vaccine, we're seeing a significant shutdown in some parts of the European economy. So the Delta variant remains the major risk as we go into 2022. A factor that's become more pronounced between Q2, Q3, and I would bet that it's become a lot more pronounced in Q4, higher inflation triggering market turmoil. We've seen a big move in US bond yields, a big move in the US dollar, and we've seen inflation rise rapidly in the US, in Europe, in the UK and in Canada. It's sporadic throughout Asia, but certainly as rising fuel prices come through, that's going to be more of an issue. And as a result, US bond yields climb higher, the US dollar climbs higher. Historically, that's been the kind of conditions that can pressure emerging markets, Brazil, Turkey, Asia. So that's certainly one risk as well, as those US bond yields rise and as the US dollar climbs, it can cause a significant issue in some of those emerging markets. So 3 opportunities, 3 big risks. And as we said, probably the biggest impact on FX markets has been that we're suddenly seeing a rise in the amount of central banks that are tightening rates. We've seen it in Singapore over the last month with the MAS tightening policy. So it's certainly prevalent right around the world. And you can see up to 2019, the majority of moves were cuts in grey, not hikes in yellow. Similar in 2020, more cuts in grey than hikes in yellow. But in 2021, all of a sudden, much fewer hikes, many more hikes. Much fewer cuts, much higher hikes. So this is clearly one of the themes as we go into 2022, that central banks around the world are already starting to see many more rate hikes, and it's likely to continue into 2022. And for businesses with FX exposure, that means we're going to see more volatility. And you can see that many businesses in yellow here still just absorb the costs, still just pass on the costs and just accept what FX markets do. And certainly one of the focuses on what we do here at Western Union Business Solutions is to help businesses mitigate the risk of foreign exchange movements. But as I said, I wanted to talk about the 3 big themes that we're seeing as we go into 2022 and how that's going to impact on Asia and Thailand more specifically. Now, the biggest theme that I've already mentioned is the different pace of vaccine rollouts and the different pace of economies returning to normal. And it's been pretty clear so far that the majority of the quick rollouts has been in the richer nations: China, UK, EU, US. And you can see here this chart really showing you that on the left, the amount of doses administered per 100 people. At the bottom, the amount of GDP per person. And so it's been a pretty clear pivot along this line. The richer the economy, the quicker the vaccine rollout has been. So that means as we go into 2022, some economies, like we said, the US, Europe, UK, back to normal. Many other economies still got some time to move forward. And that's certainly the case in Asia as well. If you look at Thailand, they're moving relatively quickly. 53% of their population is now fully vaxxed. That holds up pretty well versus the Philippines at about 36%, Indonesia about 31%, Vietnam at 37% as well. So broadly against those businesses or those countries, Thailand's getting close to that reopening mark. Obviously, Malaysia, a lot better position at 76%, and Singapore's well and truly reopened now, though, of course, like we've seen in Europe, like we've seen in other parts of the world, reopening's not without its risks as well. But this is really going to be the key theme throughout Asia that the quicker the vaccine rollout, the quicker you can reopen. And in Thailand, which we'll touch on more in a moment, with a huge part of not just their GDP, but their export growth coming from travel and tourism, it's critical to see that rollout quicken. Now, as economies recover, and we've seen this really clearly, that we're seeing a massive burst of inflation in those economies that have started to now be open for 6 months or so. And the US, overnight from the UK, Canada, we've seen much higher than expected inflation, and we've seen pressure on central banks to look to tighten, to raise rates. So this is going to be the other major theme. In FX markets, this is absolutely critical because as interest rates rise, the currency will normally rise as well. So that's why it's critical. But also, as inflation grows quickly, central banks raise rates. If they raise rates too quickly, it can impact on economic growth as well. So as those vaccine rollouts allow reopening, the next critical stage is how quick is that reopening, and does it unleash a fury of demand from that pent-up saving that consumers have, and does that impact on inflation? Now, US inflation last week was reported at 6.2%. That's the highest rate since 1990, and it's really piled on the pressure for the Federal Reserve to start raising rates. So the Federal Reserve, importantly, has said that they believe it's still short-term, so they're not going to raise rates yet. That's all well and good, but in 6 months' time, if it's not short-term, if it's not transitory, then the Federal Reserve might need to suddenly raise rates very quickly. And that's what tends to destabilise markets and upset economies. And certainly going back to the Asian financial crisis in 1997, what drove that was a series of Federal Reserve rate hikes very quickly through 1994 and 1995 and 1996. So that's why the inflation outlook and whether central banks need to act sooner rather than later is going to be critical for the global economy in 2022. Now, just to finish off on what are the key factors in the global economy in 2022, I'm sure it hasn't escaped your notice that property prices and equity markets are at all-time highs. And that's no surprise. If you look in yellow here, this is the US Federal Reserve policy rate. And whenever we're at near zero, equity markets and property markets explode higher. And that's what we're seeing at the moment, in particular in grey. The S&P 500, the US share markets, had a massively strong run since March last year, helped by very low interest rates. Property prices have seen the same story. But again, looking at the US house price index here in black, when did it fall? Well, of course, during the GFC. What happened before the GFC? This sequence of rate hikes that meant that all of a sudden, people who had borrowed at 1% found it hard to maintain the payments at 5%. So this is why the focus on reopening, inflation, central banks and asset prices will be absolutely critical. It means that this could be a recovery year that can really go either way. But overall, thanks to low interest rates at the moment, if inflation is transitory and only short-lived, then it sets up 2020 to be a really impressive, strong year in growth as global economies and individual economies really recover. The million-dollar question, as I said, is though, if inflation is persistent, that could change the story rapidly. So that's the global picture. Let's have a look at Thailand in more focus. And of course, Thailand's been one of the harder hit currencies throughout Asia as a result of the pandemic. As I said, no surprise really, because it does have such a services export-led growth, but of course that export is travel and tourism. So you can see that in terms of APAC, the scarring or GDP levels relative to pre-pandemic expectations for 2025, you can see that Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines and India have certainly been the hardest hit. Some of the other economies, and this is a topic for another day, but Vietnam, for example, really clearly managed to outperform the general view, and Taiwan's probably a bit more of an exceptional case in terms of its ability to manage COVID. But certainly you can see here, Thailand's not the worst, but it's certainly in the middle of the underperformers here, along with Malaysia, in terms of economies that have suffered a big hit to growth as a result of COVID-19. As I said, that's mainly driven by the massive hole in travel and tourism. That said, things are starting to get better, and this chart from Oxford Economics shows you that as we got to the end of October, we started to see a bit of a recovery in activity in people moving around as a good sign for economic activity. You can see grocery and farmery activity and retail and recreation making quite a strong comeback. As we've seen in other parts of the world, they're the first parts that stage a comeback. Workplace takes a little bit longer, that's in red. And transit stations or catching public transport tends to be the slowest indicator of recovery. People become very reluctant to take public transport. Part of the reason why we've seen such a huge bounce in second-hand car sales over in the or prices in the US. That's part of the reason driving inflation pressures. So as we look into this recovery phase, looking at the forecasts of where the contribution to GDP will be, you can see that certainly at the moment, that impact of net exports, and like I said in Thailand, that's in terms of exports, it's driven very much by that travel and tourism sector to an extent in terms of what we're seeing recently, that drop driven by travel and tourism, but big expectation of a comeback in net exports over the next couple of years should provide fairly robust recovery in Singapore. So I mentioned the composition of goods and services activity, and the big drop, the hole that we've seen in Thailand has been travel and tourism. You can see it accounts for about 20% here of the activity, and that's been completely eliminated altogether. But other parts and the other big sector in Thai growth, of course, is manufacturing, and the manufacturing space has become incrementally important over the last 5 or 10 years. You can see makes up more than half of exports now in Thailand. So that's really critical, but particularly in the opportunities in the tech space and what we're seeing with a lot of businesses that we're working with, that services exports have really moved quite strongly as well over the last decade. Okay, so where are the as we said, with manufacturing expected to grow very strongly and services, where do we see the real opportunities over the next 10 years? Well, we've worked with Oxford Economics to see where the major opportunities are over the next 8 or 9 years until 2029. And you can see very much manufacturing, and as you can see, particularly automobile manufacturing remains a really key sector in terms of growth. Pharmaceuticals has a huge opportunity as well. Electronic components and boards as well, also very significant as well. So construction and manufacturing really key. In terms of IT programming, consultants in information services, that services sector that's really quite key. You can see that's also seen as a real outperformer over the next balance of the decade, and we see that as having about a 60% improvement in growth over the next decade. So that's some of the key outlines that we see in Thailand. I'll let Kun look at the sector in more detail, but just to finalise my presentation, just wanted to let you know what we look to do in terms of this space. Western Union makes payments internationally for businesses and for retail, but we do it not just those payments, those one-time payments for businesses, but we work closely with our technology partners to provide bulk payments and individual payments for financial institutions, legal, educational institutions, even NGOs, non-governmental organisations as well. So we have that tech expertise to be able to plug into your product and your services and help make those international payments, quickly, both incoming and outgoing as well. So we really do have a unique skill set for technology businesses and businesses in general that are looking to make payments that are quick, effective, and accurate, and the ability to use our technology to speed up your business processes, to reduce the costs of those business processes is really quite key. And so, as we sort of look into the future, we're really looking to work more in that partnership space. We believe the future, and the businesses that are on this call really require flexible infrastructure that are built in the cloud to allow digital payments, that allow instant, safe, and convenient settlement of payments between technology suppliers and logistic partners. So you can see that our credentials are 150 million customers around the world, over 1,000 non-governmental organisations, 500 more than in financial institutions, and 700 universities. So we really do have that, understanding and scale the large-scale businesses we work with financial institutions and universities, but also work with our smaller clients as well. And so we can offer you, a whole range of different solutions, whether it's business and consumer, flexible branding options. It doesn't need to say Western Union on your product or website, and the various different integration options as well. So, we're using these kind of techniques with our fintech partners, helping businesses with payment disbursement, particularly in payroll space. If you've got clients right around the world, very quick to make those payments globally, and we can integrate within those software customers to make global payments as well. So that's really what we're looking to do. And if you do have the need for an FX payment, please reach out. As I said, really what we're looking to do for our partners is to introduce new revenue streams through FX, allow those payments in 130 different currencies, more than and in over 200 countries. And our compliance expertise is really quite key. We can handle the compliance and the know your clients in a way that really helps save time for you, enhancing your offering, and you can leverage our global payment network. But as I said, really the focus today from here is on really on the next stage with Kun. So I'll handle it back to Yingying. Thanks, Yingying.
Thanks, Stephen, for the very insightful sharing. So to the audience, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A box and we'll answer them at the end of the session. So next up, we have Kun. a veteran innovation investment professional who is now heading the strategy and investment department at RISE Corporate Innovation Powerhouse and CX Ventures. So throughout his career, Kun has advised more than 20 reputational corporates and also more than 100 deep tech startups in their innovation journey. So in addition, he also wrote the Corporate Innovation Maturity Model, a proprietary tool adopted by more than 400 global organizations to assess their innovation readiness. Kun received his MBA from MIT Sloan and Bachelor of Engineering from the ISE Chulalongkorn University. So let's welcome Kun, please.
Thank you, Ying, for the kind introduction. So let me share my screen a little bit, and then we can start. Give me 1 second. All right. Okay. All right. So so hi there. So how you guys? So my name is Gan. Like Ying said, I'm the head of strategy and investment at RISE, and it's my pleasure to be here. Sharing my humble experience supporting startup, expanding into Thailand and Southeast Asia, and I'm looking to support or provide any insight that you would be interested in, right? So first of all, who we are, right? We are leading corporate innovation powerhouse. Basically, we help large corporate in the region to innovate faster, right? We work with 400 of corporate across 4 countries in Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia, and we help them to innovate more effectively. How we do it? We do 4 things, right? So we do corporate accelerator. We help the corporate to work with the startups of their choice to co-create tangible pilot together. Second, we help the large corporate transform their employees, right, to become entrepreneurs, spin off new products and services. We have a $50 million deep tech VC fund called CX Ventures. We invest in 2 unicorns already. And lastly, we run a number of tech conferences, right? If you have heard, we have a flagship called Corporate Innovation Summit, right? Before we start, a little bit about myself. I spent the past decade, right, in the investment and innovation space, advising across the globe, right, in the organization like Microsoft, AIA, and also advising a lot of startups as well. So today, we will cover a few topics, right? So let's talk about the Thailand as a whole. Then we talk about the startup ecosystem, and then we give you some tips on how to do business in Thailand, right? But again, Thailand is all about fun and joy. So maybe let's have a fun quiz on how well you know Thailand, right? So maybe can you type in the chat box what is this one? Can anyone answer? Right, Tom Yam Goong, amazing. Good to hear. Someone is fan, right? So have you ever been to this one? This place is a very beautiful temple. Maybe not. All right. So this is the 1 second. This is the Wat Rong Kun, right? This is the white temple in the northern area of Thailand in Chiang Rai, right? Do you know this one? Anyone know this? Oh, come on. Right. Okay. Fine. We have to move on. So this one is Soy Cowboy, right? Actually this is if you can answer, maybe not a good thing. And lastly, right? Do you know this guy? Yep, he's the Prime Minister of Thailand, General Prayut Chan-o-cha. He took over the power by coup 7 years ago, and now he's still in the power. All right. Okay. So seems like you know a little bit about Thailand, and let's deep dive into our key topic today, which is first about the Thailand market overview, right? So so why Thailand, right? To be honest with you, if I say, hey, Thailand is the best country in the world, and every startup should do business in Thailand, then I would be lying to you, right? Because absolutely, we are not, but we are among the attractive one because of these 5 reasons, right? Let me deep dive one by one. First, we are the second largest GDP in Southeast Asia after Indonesia, right? Secondly, we have the strategic location, right, in the center of the region, connected by land and by sea. Third, we have the real sectors, right? We talk about food, agriculture, healthcare, tourism. We have about 40 million tourists per year, right? Without COVID. Four, it's very, very cheap to do business. So office cost is low, the cost of living is low as well. And lastly, we have a lot of government support, right? So let's see, let's deep dive one by one. So when we talk about Thailand economy, right? So we have about 540 billion US dollar in GDP, with about 2-3% GDP growth, quite large, right? And secondly, compared to Hong Kong or Singapore, I would say we have real sectors such as manufacturing, food, agriculture, financial services, tourism, healthcare. Healthcare is very big here in Thailand, given the reason that we have a very quickly aging population, right? Because we have quite low birth rate. This might be good for health tech company as well. People ask me, hey, Gan, then we are the second largest economy, then we just go to the largest Indonesia. Then I would say the key reason why you should choose Thailand as well is that we are the most connected country in Southeast Asia, right? We are next to Laos, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Malaysia on land, and we have Indian Ocean and we have Pacific Ocean by sea, right? We have a lot of FTAs, so you can export without tariff to about 80 nations, I would say. What else is unique about Thailand, right? We are very, very digital savvy, right? So we have very high mobile penetration rate, right? We have about 134%, which actually mean that one person has more than one phone, right? So my foreign friend like to joke with me that, hey, maybe you people have multiple girlfriend, boyfriend, so we need more phone. But that's just a joke, right? So we spend a crazy amount of time on internet as well, right? So we spend about 9 hours a day. So I would like to say that that's a very, very big number. I presume that most people just use a lot of internet for working. Moreover, we spend a lot of time on social media as well, almost 3 hours a day. This is actually more than advanced country like US, China, and the world. And therefore, if you're coming into Thailand, then feel free to take advantage of our very, very high mobile social network penetration. Now, let's talk about regulation, right? According to the World Bank, we are actually the 3rd easiest country to do business in Southeast Asia, right? Based on 12 areas of regulation, such as ease to setting up business, getting electricity, utility, employing people, right? So with these reasons combined, then they found out that we are the 3rd easiest country in Southeast Asia, right? So a lot of given information that I told you, right? So a lot of MNCs, startups, unicorn, large corporate, right? They pick Thailand to be the regional hub, right? To be the manufacturing hub, to be the R&D hub, right? So please consider us given the information I give you. But again, one thing to be aware of, right? Our politics is suboptimal, I would say. We have like 18 coups in 70 years, fourth most frequent in the world. And we are not really good in terms of the corruption as well. But again, no country is perfect, right? But make sure that you are aware of this, find your way around, make a decision for yourself. Now, many people ask us about the startup ecosystem, right? How does it look like? So we have about 1,500 startups so far in the country. We have a lot of government agencies, corporate investing startups, VCs, CVC, accelerator, incubators, and medias, and even active in the space as well. So I would say we are quite a small, right, but vibrant ecosystem compared to the other countries. To be honest with you, 1,500 is not a big number, right? It's very small compared to the other countries, but but it's growing very, very fast. It's from my experience doing this for quite a while, I see the number double every 2 years, right? And we see the startups right now are quite concentrated in a few areas. So we talk about fintech, talk about ecosystem, logistics, e-commerce, and some and other industry that you can see on my slide. Having low number of startups, right, is actually a good thing for you, in my view, because it implies low competition, right? And if you have a strong, unique, innovative product, then it is very unlikely that you will find another competitor in Thailand, right? So when we look into US market or China market, right, in the news, if you see a tech news in Crunchbase or CB Insight or whatever about emerging startup or technology, then I would say tomorrow there will be a dozen of new startup rushing in, imitating them. But that doesn't happen a lot in Thailand. We have a lot of rooms and space for foreign startup to come in, right? So this is a good thing for you. Let's see fundraising situation in Thailand, right? So a lot of startup, of course, looking for funding, right? And in Thailand, we have what we call Series B gap, meaning that 70% of the startups in Thailand are in Series A or below, right? Very few startups reach Series B and above. So this is what we call Series B gap. So a lot of startups in Thailand, when they reach Series A and they want to go beyond Series A, they have to seek funding outside of Thailand, right? So the trend is shifting, I would say. I see a lot of investors being more confident, invest in a higher ticket size, moving up the series, right? But right now we still see the Series B gap. One of the good news in the past year, in this year actually, we have 2 new unicorns, right? We have Flash Express, which is a logistics company. We have BitCup, which is a cryptocurrency exchange, right? We have 2 unicorns already, and we expect to see a few more unicorn emerging in the near future. Well, some people are thinking about exiting in Thailand as well, right? So unfortunately, all the startup exit in the past are all M&A, right? We don't have IPOs yet on a tech startup in Thailand yet, right? So this is so if you're looking to exit, M&A may be a little bit better choice in region. One of the other unique characteristics of Thai ecosystem is that 80% of the investors in Thailand are the corporate, right? Are the corporate, not the financial VCs, right? So you are looking at CVCs, right? So Thai corporate are very, very innovative and flexible and fast moving. They love to partner up and invest in the startups. that can offer strategic value to them, right? So you can see the banks, you can see the energy company, oil and gas, you can see the telecom, you can see property developers, right? Even the food and Sing BS invest in a lot of startup as well. So if you wish to do well in Thailand, it's almost inevitable for you to join force with them, with the corporate at some point, right? So if you don't remember anything in the session, just remember this: come to Thailand, find a corporate to partner with, right? So why we don't have a lot of VC, right? I would say simply because of the regulation, tax benefits are not that great comparative to let's say Singapore or Hong Kong, right? So that's why a lot of VCs they don't set up fund in Thailand, right? They set up fund elsewhere, and normally the people who set up fund in Thailand are CVCs. For those who are not familiar with corporate VC, right? The sort of fund of CVC is actually internal fund. Let's say it's a revenue, it's a profit, it's a resource reallocation somewhere. The fund life normally no fund life. They just it's perpetual. They focus on strategic return. They focus on how you can transfer the know-how, can co-develop the product, can go to the market together with them, something like that. So this is the key focus for the CVC. Some key trend to focus on, right? So we can see coming of age unicorn, right? We foresee a lot of unicorns in the future. One of the reasons is that we expect bigger ticket size over time, right? We see a lot of investors, big and small, are being more confident. Therefore, they invest in bigger ticket size, right? We see a lot of startups going abroad as well, going global, right? To across Southeast Asia, to US, to China, to Japan, Korea. We see a lot of new startups coming in from the new generation of startup as well. So what kind of technologies that we are looking for? The corporates that working with us, they talk about 4 key things, right? First, big data, right? How to manage data better, how to do AI, machine learning, how to do process automation. Thai corporates, they talk about data, but they have little clue, right? How to actually leverage it. So this is the area that you can tap on. Big technologies, right? Food, beverage, health, biotech. We don't have a lot of local deep tech talent at all. We don't have a lot of researchers. We are very, very good in the corporate landscape, but we don't have a lot of deep tech people, right? 5G. We have very, very good infrastructure. We have 5G. We have one of the fastest internet in the world, and we have a big market in manufacturing and agriculture. So if you are doing something about 5G, feel free to look consider Thailand. And lastly, right, enterprise solution, right? So we have very strong corporate landscape. So we don't have a lot of solution. So if you do enterprise solution, then you could consider Thai market. Right. So that we talk about Thailand overview. We talk about Thai startup ecosystem. Now, let me give you some tips about doing business in Thailand, right? Before I move on, if you have question, Q&A, whatever, feel free to leave in the chat box so we can circle back later on, right? We are here to answer your question. First, talk about BOI, right? Board of Investment. Basically, they promote inbound investment into Thailand, right? So make sure that you maximize the BOI benefit, right? If you are in the middle box category, right, you might be applicable to the BOI benefit, right? Tax and non-tax benefit. For tax benefit, you might be exempt from corporate income tax or the import duty, right? For the non-tax benefit, you can hold the majority shareholding. You can own land, you can do many things here, right? So at Rise, we also have the services focus on this one. We support the startup coming into Thailand and getting the BOI. We need to talk about visa as well, right? If you are tech executives, you are tech talent, you are investors, you are startups, then you can apply for a smart visa to work in Thailand. The process can take about 3 months. Co-working space is very, really easy and cheap to find in Thailand, anywhere in the city center, along the BTS line, right? The SkyTrain line, right? One seat can cost less than $200 per month, very cheap, right? So we have international brand, we will just go. We have local brand, Hapa, Common Ground, a lot of co-working space everywhere, right? Super convenient for the startups, right? We also have our own co-working space as well. If you have been in Thailand, you will know Central World, right? Central World is a very large department store, and we are across the street. We are in the Gason Tower. The salary is significantly lower as well in every row compared to Singapore and USA. So many startups consider building a quality team here, a local team here, to do the sales, to become headquarter, do R&D. So it's very cheap here. But last but not least, right? I just want to say that one key takeaway from today that I just want to say is that Thailand is a very relationship-oriented country, right? Know who is more important than know how, right? You have to know who, right? So a lot of corporate and startup, they choose to find go-to-market partners here, right? To find local partners here, partners who know the market, partner who knows the people, right? So let me give you some example. Grab, right? They partner with Grab partner with KBank, right? To get the banking license or infrastructure in Thailand. JD.com, Alibaba, right? They choose to work with the local partners like Central Group, Lazada, Tencent. They choose to acquire Sanuk, which is a content media channel, right? So this is some example. Make sure that you know the people on the ground, people or find someone who can help you on the ground, right? Last but not least, we are a very beautiful country. So enjoy travel, food, culture, nightlife, and anything whenever you come here. Thank you, and let's move to Q&A.
Thank you, Kun, for your insights. Okay, so gentle reminder to the audience, do post your questions in the Q&A box, and we will invite the rest of the panel back to the session. Okay, so I do see one question right now for Stephen. So in the graphs that Stephen showed earlier, automotive was not among the top focus industry. So he's checking whether it should have been included.
No, that's a good question. The automobiles industry is certainly a big driver, but it doesn't quite get, in terms of the growth in the industry over the next decade, doesn't quite get into the top categories. So the growth that we expect over between 2019 and 2029 for automobiles is 37%. So the ones that we were looking at that were really outperforming ships, motorcycles and military vehicles are at 67%, pharmaceuticals at 63%. So yeah, automobiles absolutely critical and a huge component, but in terms of the growth, they're not at the absolute top of the growth forecasts over the next balance of the decade. So that's why automobiles weren't there. That said, 37% over that decade is still really strong, and it looks pretty good compared to the 30% that we have forecast for the growth in Thailand between 2019 and 2029. So automobiles absolutely a major driver, but the pace of growth over the decade isn't quite as great as some of the other industries that we mentioned, most notably IT, programming, consultancy, and investment services forecast to grow 61%. That's obviously a real hotspot over that decade.
Okay, thanks for sharing. There's another question on IP. Is that a concern in Thailand?
Yes,
Yeah, it's a very.
Yes, it is. I mean, if you compare us to US or Europe, we are the enforcement of law is not as strong, honestly, but it's still a concern. It's still a concern here.
So are there any specific things that the Singapore companies can probably do to protect themselves?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of things you can do here. You can, we have some local. First of all, I'm not a IP expert, but you should definitely register your own IP here in Thailand if you expect to do big things or innovative things here.
Okay, sure. For the Singapore company, if you are interested in IP, you can always connect with me. I can direct you to IPOS International, who will be able to advise you on IP matters. All right. So next question that is from Rachel. What are the top 3 upcoming unicorn businesses that foreigners can look towards, I guess, if they were to start out or invest in Thailand?
So in Thailand, right? So I would say a few. I would circle back to the key tech areas that I mentioned. First, it's about the data. I think a lot of people are looking for data solution, right? And this is something that we are definitely lacking of in Thailand. And the second tech areas that I would definitely suggesting is the deep technologies. I think we are big hub in terms of the healthcare, food, agriculture. So you bring in deep technologies, deep research, business that focus around the deep technologies on this front, then I think it's definitely the interesting point. The other 2 technologies that I want to touch quickly is the IoT, drones, robotics, and the last one is the enterprise solution. We have a lot of corporate. Our economy is highly dominated by the large corporate. So anything to do with the large corporate, anything to do with the 5G connectivity, drone, robotics for agricultural manufacturing space, then very likely to become unicorn. My opinion.
Okay, we do have one question regarding high investment in order to set up a local ownership for a legal entity. Do you have an answer for this?
So I don't think the fee is high. I think what's difficult is to get the BOI. I mean, because right now, if you are the foreign entity, right? When you want to set up business in Thailand, you cannot hold majority of the share yet. Basically, you need some local people to hold 50% of the share, and you hold the rest, or you do nominee, but nominee is not legal here in Thailand, right? So the way to go about it is to apply for BOI, right? And BOI can be complex for foreign startup because you don't know the guy, or you don't know how to convince the BOI, or the application process may be complex for some foreign startups, right? So I think the key point is to how do you get the BOI, or how do you, or if not at all, right? If you don't want to navigate BOI, the other way is just through the JV, right? Find a JV, find a partners. To establish your presence here in Thailand first, do the JV with your trusted partner, and then you think about convert it into your own 100% entity later, right? So it depends on your strategy. But again, we are here to support you. We have this we have this service if you are interested.
Okay. And also good news to the audience. Tomorrow we'll be having a speaker from BOI. So if you have further questions regarding the Board of Investment, you can also post the questions tomorrow. So do remember to join us again. All right. I see another question. Yeah.
Okay.
Another question from Rachel. Would you suggest foreign business owners in Thailand to take loans from local Thai banks or from their own foreign banks from abroad? Yeah, it seems like a very technical question.
Yeah, I think luckily I used to work in the commercial banking space before, and Steven, if you can pitch in as well, because you were expert in the currency risks and stuff. So first of all, I think the interest rate in Thailand is really low. I think the first of all, I think you can the bank, if you see the rate of the access to banking and loan in Thailand, right? It's quite good. I think a lot of corporate and SMEs and startup in Thailand can access to lending in Thailand, to loan in Thailand very cheaply and very nicely as well. Some government initiative allow you to borrow at very cheap rate, right? But I don't have the exact rate in my hand yet, but there is some government support on this one. But if you but I would suggest that you borrow in Thailand for your business in Thailand, right? Because if you borrow Thai loan for international business, you are exposed to the international currency exchange risk. Then and currently I would say the currency is quite fluctuated. It's weakened, it's strengthened all the time. So I don't think you should expose yourself with that kind of risk. Yeah.
I'll just jump in there as well, Kun, and I think you're spot on when you're saying really where you're looking to borrow is where your business activity is. So really you want your loan repayments to be matching where your cash flows are generated. So you don't want to be borrowing outside of that area. So once you do that, then you need to start thinking about, well, do we need to hedge the payments? So it just gets that extra layer of complexity. And certainly when you've got a startup, you're trying to reduce the complexity as much as you can without introducing a new financial risk involved. So the only proviso I'd say is that if you're established in Singapore, you've got business operations and you're starting off in Thailand, then you might say, well, let's continue borrowing in Singapore because this is where the majority of our operations are, even though some of those cash flows are coming from Thailand as well. But in general, you want to borrow where the cash flow is going to be coming from.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. We do have more questions from the Q&A, but maybe one question from me. So Thailand is very big, right? So are there any preferred cities for tech companies to go into? And is there any issues with hiring of tech talents in the maybe smaller cities? Because I believe that most...
You have a very nice question. So many people ask me this question as well. I would say if you are a startup that focus around the other corporate, or I would suggest strongly let's stay in Bangkok, right? 80% of the economy in Thailand is centralized in Bangkok, right? It's very, very centralized country. We don't have a lot of states like US. We just stay in Bangkok, right? But also we see a lot of nomad, right? Digital nomad and also digital platform living in the Phuket or Chiang Mai as well. So if you know, Chiang Mai and Phuket are very big tourism cities, and foreigners love the cities, right? And they like to stay by the beach. They want to stay by the mountain and nice weather. So digital nomad, they like to stay there, right? But I would say again, Thailand is a very centralized country. If you want to, but generally, I think startups should pick Bangkok if you like if you don't have super purity in the lifestyle. Yeah.
So do you mean that the digital nomads are also tech talents and they are open to work remotely from those parts
Anywhere.
of Thailand. I
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
I see.
So
Interesting.
if your platform can be managed from anywhere, then many people like to stay in Phuket or Chiang Mai.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we don't have much questions today. So maybe I'll invite the speakers to give your final remarks to our audience today. Maybe Stephen?
Thanks, Ying. Well, yeah, obviously very grateful to be part of this discussion. Kun, really enjoyed your insights. That was fantastic. In terms of what we're looking to do, as we mentioned in the intro, we think that this year there's certainly a lot of opportunity in the global economy as we come out of the recovery. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because normally the global economy moves in a very connected, cyclical way. This time we've got some parts of the world, US, UK, Europe, already completely behind COVID, completely behind them in terms of economic activity. In Asia here, we're still in that recovery phase. I mean, in Australia, where I am, we're only just reopening. So it's going to be a very different pace of recovery that provides opportunities and real risks, I think, as well. In terms of FX, it probably means that foreign exchange markets are going to be more volatile than ever, because, of course, you measure one currency versus another currency. And, for example, if the US is growing very quickly and, for example, Thailand's still in lockdown and doesn't have the ability to bring tourists in, that can have a big impact on those currencies as well. So that different pace of growth is really going to be critical. We're certainly very keen to help our clients to navigate that volatility, and we think really there are ways in putting processes in place so you're not exposed to the foreign exchange risk, and that's certainly what I'd be saying to our clients and anyone who's involved in business, that there's probably going to be bigger moves in currency markets in 2022 than we've seen for a couple of years. Probably not 2020, because we saw some big moves then as well. But it does seem like we're going to see some more volatility. So it's an important risk that I think that you can remove fairly easily. And we're certainly keen to help you both in managing the payment process by moving into your back end, or by providing a specific white label process, but also to help you just with managing what might be a fairly volatile year in 2022.
And Kun?
Thank you. So I would say just one key point: know who more than know how. Just find your local partners, find your some people who can help you on the ground.
Okay, thanks for the advice. Yeah, and I think we have come to the end of today's session. So let's go through some of the upcoming activities that we have. So like I mentioned, tomorrow we will have BOI coming in to share on the legal landscape and tax regime. And we will also be featuring a global tech business outlook for 2022 coming up on 13 January. So if you're interested, do register for our webinars. And as usual, if you have any feedback or comments for us, do leave them on our survey form, and follow us on LinkedIn if you are interested to find out more about what SG Tech does and also our upcoming activities. All these links can also be found in the chat, so you can just click on the links directly. Okay, and thanks very much to our panelists today for your insightful sharing. And also, I see some questions regarding connecting with the speakers. So yes, we will be happy to facilitate. So if you need to reach out to the speakers, feel free to just email us. Our email address is also listed on the chat as well, Zoom chat as well. So yeah, thank you. And once again, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.